He's not moving. I found this.
I'm coming. Stay right there.
Chicago, autumn. Nathaniel Carter, a brilliant CEO and flawed father, storms from a boardroom as sirens rise. A trembling boy whispers, "Your son is bleeding." On the sidewalk, a crumpled paper airplane with Nathaniel's number lies by Daniel's hand, the token he gave him and forgot. Guilt hits like cold wind. Who hurt his son, and why did this boy refuse to leave? Keep watching. Chicago leaned into evening, the lake wind moving like a cold hand along the river. Nathaniel Carter stood at the glass wall of his boardroom, tall and broad-shouldered, a navy suit fitted to his muscular frame. A crisp white shirt and a red tie catching the city's glow. Deep blue eyes, dark brown hair brushed to the side with elegant threads of gray, a strong jaw set with control. He looked like a man who owned his skyline. He knew the truth. The skyline owned him. Logistics trucks flowed like small beads along the freeway. Freight sensors pinged across rail yards. Battery depots waited under the hum of autumn. His empire connected ports, warehouses, charging corridors. He had led the world to move faster, cleaner, smarter. He could route a container from Manila to Joliet in minutes. He could not route himself to a Saturday baseball game. 15 minutes, his chief of staff said softly. The city committee wants your final position on the South Side hub. The union's ready. Investors, too. Thank you, he said, voice even. Bring the projections. He stayed at the window after she left. On the table behind him sat a single paper airplane. White copy paper, creases neat, the tip softened by too many flights across too many rooms. Daniel had folded it the last time they were here together, a month ago. The boy had written a phone number along one wing in a child's steady hand. Nathaniel's number. He had laughed and said, "Keep it with you, kiddo. It will always get to me," but always had not been true. It had not been true on a Tuesday when a school counselor asked why he missed the fall festival. It had not been true on Daniel's birthday when a board vote ran long and a cake sat in a kitchen he no longer lived in. Nathaniel pressed his thumbs along the plane's spine, breathing through the ache that rose without asking permission. He pictured Daniel in his oversized hoodie, hair in his eyes, chin lifted as if stubbornness could carry a heart over a hurt. "You coming this time?" the boy had asked at the batting cages. "I didn't think you'd remember my birthday," he had said, a half smile to soften it, a habit he learned too young. Nathaniel had squeezed his shoulder. Some things you never forget. He had meant it. He had still missed. The door opened and a procession of people entered. Legal, finance, infrastructure, public affairs. Laptops, binders, lanyards, the clatter of plans. They spoke in turns about charging nodes, workforce training, neighborhood impact. He answered in measured sentences. He knew which numbers would land. He knew which promises the city needed to hear and what it would cost to keep them. When the talk moved to timelines, his mind drifted again to a small kitchen in a home he rented 2 blocks from Daniel's school. The place smelled like coffee and lemon oil when it was clean, like cardboard and anxiety when he was late. There was a shoe rack by the door, one shelf for Daniel, one for guests who never came. A magnet on the fridge held a single Polaroid of father and son at the river last summer, both squinting into sunlight, both pretending not to notice the space between their shoulders. "Nate?" The CFO leaned in. "We need a decision on the risk exposure for Q4. If city funding lags, we have to scale the South Side rollout. You want to hold the line?" He dragged himself back. "We hold the line," he said. "We commit to the training center and the battery yard. We put our name on something that lasts." Heads nodded. Someone said, "That's leadership." He did not feel like a leader. He felt like a man stitching a sail in a storm and calling it a flag. His phone buzzed once on the table, a text from the school app, a reminder for parent-teacher conferences. He added it to his calendar and stared at the time he had chosen. 6 p.m., Thursday. He would make it. He told himself this over and over, until the words sounded like truth. The room settled. The legal lead asked for closing remarks. Nathaniel lifted the paper airplane, turning it with careful fingers. A symbol of a promise, plain and fragile, that could carry farther than most people believed. He set it on the table, aligned with his notes. "We move forward," he said, voice steady. "We do it right." Outside, the river slid by, dark and quick. In the glass, he caught his reflection. A handsome man with everything. A father trying to learn the only job that mattered. Somewhere, a boy's voice he loved waited for him to arrive on time. He rested his palm on the paper plane, as if it were a button he could press to return home. The conference room on the top floor of Carter Global pulsed with tension. Charts glowed across the wall-sized screen. Executives debated over profit margins, and Nathaniel Carter sat at the head of the table, jaw tight, eyes fixed but distant. His navy suit was immaculate, his red tie a perfect knot, but his mind wandered elsewhere. His phone, usually silenced during meetings, buzzed across the polished oak. At first, he ignored it. Then he saw the screen. Unknown caller. Something in his gut twisted. He answered, his deep voice curt. "Mr. Carter?" A boy's trembling voice wavered through the line. "Your son. He's bleeding on the sidewalk. He won't wake up." The room fell away. His executives' voices blurred into nothing. Nathaniel shot to his feet, chair screeching back. "Where are you?" His voice cut like steel, urgent and raw. Sirens howled faintly in the background. The boy stammered through sobs, giving the cross street. I didn't know who else to call. I found this paper airplane. It had your number. I'm sorry. Please hurry." A paper airplane. Daniel's paper airplane. Nathaniel had folded it for him years ago, scribbling his private number as a promise he thought was symbolic. He hadn't realized Daniel still carried it. "Stay with him," Nathaniel ordered. "Don't leave him alone." "I won't," the boy whispered. "I'll wait until you come." Nathaniel dropped the phone into his pocket and stormed toward the exit, ignoring the executive's stunned stares. For once, the company could wait. His son couldn't. The helicopter blades roared as Nathaniel Carter descended from the rooftop helipad. Chicago sprawled beneath him in orange and steel, headlights streaking along wet asphalt. His heart pounded against the cage of his chest, louder than the engine, louder than reason. By the time his driver screeched the black sedan to a halt at the corner the boy had described, Nathaniel had already thrown the door open. Red and blue lights pulsed against brick walls. A knot of strangers stood watching. On the sidewalk, paramedics bent over his son. Daniel's small frame lay still, his hoodie torn, his face pale under the harsh glow of streetlights. Nathaniel's breath caught. He was 12, too young to look so fragile. "Daniel!" he barked, pushing past officers who tried to hold him back. He knelt beside the stretcher, gripping his son's cold hand. "Stay with me, son. I'm here." His voice cracked on the last word. A shuffle of movement drew his eyes to a boy standing just beyond the circle of paramedics. Barely 9, skinny, his jeans frayed at the cuffs. He clutched something in his fist so tight his knuckles whitened. Nathaniel rose, staring. "Were you the one who called me?" The boy nodded quickly, eyes wide with fear and determination. Slowly, he opened his hand. In his palm lay a crumpled paper airplane, its wings bent, Daniel's scrawled handwriting faint but visible. Nathaniel's private number ran across one side. "I found this next to him," the boy whispered. "I thought maybe it mattered. So I called. Everyone else just walked by." Nathaniel swallowed hard, torn between grief and gratitude. A child from the streets had stayed when grown men had turned their faces away. "What's your name?" he asked. "Marcus," the boy said softly. Nathaniel reached out, resting his hand over the fragile paper. It was more than a toy now. It was a lifeline, a bridge between his broken promise and this moment. Behind him, a medic called, "He's breathing steady, but we need to move him now." Nathaniel's eyes burned as he looked back at Marcus. "You saved my son's life tonight." Marcus shook his head. I just didn't want him to be alone." Nathaniel stood between the two boys, his own child fighting to hold on, and another boy who had refused to let go. For the first time in years, he felt the sharp weight of the distance he had allowed to grow, the cost of building an empire while his son carried a paper airplane instead of a father's presence. The stretcher rattled as paramedics lifted Daniel toward the ambulance. Nathaniel pressed close, unwilling to let go of his son's hand. "Stay with me, son. Please, stay with me." His whisper was raw, stripped of CEO polish, nothing but a father's plea. Daniel stirred faintly, a low groan slipping from his lips. Relief and fear tangled in Nathaniel's chest. He looked at Marcus. The boy stood rooted to the curb, trembling, the paper airplane still clenched in his small hand. An officer stepped toward him. "Kid, you need to go home. This isn't—" "No," Nathaniel snapped, his voice hard enough to freeze the air. He softened when he turned back to Marcus. "You stayed with him. You called me. You don't leave now." Marcus's eyes welled. I didn't want him to wake up alone." People kept walking past. They didn't even look. Nathaniel's throat tightened. He glanced at the crowd, grown adults gawking but doing nothing, then back at this boy who had chosen differently. "You did more than most men would. You were braver than I was tonight." The words shocked him even as he said them. Braver than I was, because the truth pressed heavy. He had missed practices, birthdays, moments. Marcus, a boy with nothing, had shown up when it mattered most. The paramedics shouted, "We're moving!" Nathaniel climbed into the ambulance, keeping hold of Daniel's hand. Just before the doors closed, Marcus stepped forward, clutching the paper airplane. He placed it gently on Daniel's chest, smoothing the crumpled wing. "I'll wait outside," he whispered. Nathaniel locked eyes with him through the glass as the ambulance roared to life. In that fleeting moment, he saw something in Marcus's face, a mix of fear, loyalty, and longing. The look of a child who had stood against the world because no one else would. As the sirens wailed and the city blurred past, Nathaniel held his son's hand tight, but his thoughts burned with a question that wouldn't let him rest. Why was Daniel alone in the first place, and who had left him bleeding on that street? The hospital's fluorescent lights cast everything in a cold glow. Daniel was whisked into a trauma room, doctors working swiftly. Nathaniel stood just outside the glass, fists clenched, his heart caught between guilt and fury. Behind him, Marcus hovered awkwardly near a vending machine, too small for the weight he carried. Nathaniel walked over, his polished shoes sounding loud in the sterile hall. "You said you found him," Nathaniel began, his voice steady but low. "What happened before that?" Marcus's eyes dropped to the floor. "He was walking home. Some kids from the neighborhood. They don't like him. Said he thought he was better because he had new shoes. They shoved him. He tried to fight back. I saw it happen." Nathaniel felt heat surge in his chest. "And you?" "I yelled at them," Marcus admitted, his thin shoulders stiff. "I tried to stop them, but there were three. They pushed him down, hit him. Then they ran. He wasn't moving. I saw the paper airplane on the ground, and I thought maybe it meant something. So I called." Nathaniel's breath caught. A boy who had nothing, torn jacket, dirt-smudged face, had stepped into danger to defend his son. A sharp voice interrupted. "Mr. Carter?" A woman in a white coat, the attending physician, approached. "Your son has a concussion. No skull fracture. He'll need monitoring, but we expect a full recovery." The air left Nathaniel's chest in a rush. Relief, but also a bitter edge. He hadn't been there to protect Daniel. Marcus had. Nathaniel pulled out his phone, dialing his head of security. "I want every detail," he ordered when the man answered. "Pull the street cameras near West Adams and Racine. Find out who these boys are, tonight." When he hung up, he turned back to Marcus. The boy stood straight now, as if bracing for dismissal. "You don't have to stay," Nathaniel said, his voice softer. Marcus looked at him, dark eyes steady. "I said I wouldn't leave him alone. I meant it." For a moment, Nathaniel couldn't speak. His own son had spent nights wondering if his father would show up. And here was a boy with no blood ties, no reason to stay, yet he did. Nathaniel put a hand gently on Marcus's shoulder. Then neither will I. Inside the room, Daniel stirred under the machines. Outside, his father and a boy from the streets stood side by side, waiting. Hours later, the steady beep of the monitors filled Daniel's hospital room. Nathaniel sat at his son's bedside, his large hand wrapped around the boy's smaller one. Daniel's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. The machines kept their rhythm. Behind him, Marcus sat curled in a chair, legs tucked up, his jacket pulled tight. He hadn't moved since they brought Daniel in. Nathaniel's phone buzzed again. His head of security spoke crisply. "We reviewed the footage. 3 older boys cornered him after school. Locals, known for trouble. One threw the first punch. Then they ran when people came close." "And Marcus?" Nathaniel asked quietly. "He tried to intervene, then ran to find a phone. Without him, your son would have been left unconscious until someone bothered to stop." Nathaniel ended the call, his jaw tight. He turned back to the boy sleeping in the chair. Marcus's head had tilted to the side, exhaustion etched into every line of his small face. His sneakers were scuffed, one sole peeling away. His hands were folded around the paper airplane, still creased and torn from the street. Nathaniel stared at him, a hollow ache spreading. A child with no ties had shown his son more loyalty in a single night than he himself had in months. He thought of the missed birthdays, the baseball games where Daniel scanned the bleachers for a face that never appeared. He thought of his ex-wife's voice, tired and sharp. "You love your company more than your child." He denied it then, but sitting here now, he had no defense. Daniel stirred, whispering faintly, "Dad?" Nathaniel leaned close. "I'm here, son. I'm not going anywhere." The boy's lips moved again. "Marcus?" Nathaniel glanced at the chair. "He's right there. He stayed." A weak smile tugged at Daniel's mouth before he drifted back into sleep. Nathaniel swallowed hard, emotion knotting his throat. He reached out, adjusting the blanket around his son. The door clicked open. A nurse slipped in, checking vitals. "He's stable," she said softly. "He'll need rest, but he'll be okay." When she left, the room fell quiet again. Nathaniel looked between his son and the boy who had refused to leave him. For the first time in years, Nathaniel Carter, the man who ruled skylines, felt painfully small. The hospital corridor was silent except for the shuffle of nurses' shoes and the hum of vending machines. Nathaniel sat alone on a hard plastic chair just outside Daniel's room, elbows resting on his knees, face buried in his hands. He had closed billion-dollar deals, negotiated with governments, outmaneuvered rivals. But this, fatherhood, felt like an impossible language he had never learned to speak. Images crashed through his mind. Daniel sitting on a porch step with a bat across his knees, waiting for a father who didn't come. A birthday cake cut without him, 12 candles burning down to smoke. Now his son lay in a hospital bed, and it was Marcus, a boy with nothing, who had stood by him. Nathaniel's chest burned with shame. The door creaked. Marcus peeked out, his hoodie too big for his thin frame. "He's asleep again." Nathaniel straightened. "Thank you for staying." Marcus shrugged, looking at the floor. "I told him I wouldn't leave." Nathaniel studied him. "Why? You don't even know us." The boy hesitated, then whispered, "Because I know what it feels like when no one shows up." His voice cracked, barely above a whisper. The words struck deep. Nathaniel had built towers of glass and steel, but here stood a child reminding him of what truly mattered. When Marcus slipped back into the room, Nathaniel leaned against the wall, his breath uneven. Doubt crept in like a tide he couldn't hold back. "What if I'm too late?" he thought. "What if Daniel never forgives me?" He pulled the crumpled paper airplane from his pocket. The creases were soft with wear, the number smudged from small hands carrying it everywhere. A promise Nathaniel had given once and failed to live. In that quiet hallway, The truth hit him harder than any boardroom defeat. He feared not losing his empire, but losing the right to be called Dad. The morning light spilled through the tall hospital windows, pale and cold against the linoleum floor. Nathaniel walked into the lobby carrying 2 cups of hot cocoa he'd grabbed from the cafeteria. He found Marcus sitting alone on a bench, knees tucked, arms wrapped around himself, shivering in the same thin hoodie. The boy looked up, startled, when Nathaniel approached. Nathaniel held out 1 cup. "It's not much, but it's warm." Marcus blinked. "For me?" Nathaniel sat down beside him. "For you. You earned it." The boy wrapped his hands around the paper cup, soaking in the heat. He drank slowly, as if afraid it would vanish too soon. Nathaniel studied him, noticing how small his shoulders were, how his shoes barely held together. "You stayed with Daniel when no one else did," Nathaniel said quietly. "That means something to me. More than you know." Marcus's eyes dropped. "I don't want anything. I just didn't want him to wake up alone." Nathaniel leaned forward, his voice gentle. "I'm not offering money. I'm offering family. At least a warm meal, clothes that fit, a place where you don't have to wonder if someone cares." Marcus froze, the cocoa trembling in his grip. "Why? You don't even know me." "Because," Nathaniel said, lowering himself to the boy's eye level, "sometimes people walk into your life when you least expect it, and they remind you who you're supposed to be. You did that for me last night. Let me do something for you." Marcus shook his head quickly, tears gathering in his eyes. "I don't want your money. I just wanted someone to come for your boy." Nathaniel's chest tightened. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled paper airplane. Gently, he placed it in Marcus's hand. "That's why I came, for my son, and for the boy who made sure he wasn't alone." Marcus stared at the little airplane, his lip trembling. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, slowly, he nodded, clutching it like it was the most valuable thing he had ever been given. For Nathaniel, the deal was sealed without contracts or signatures. A second chance had just begun. That evening, Nathaniel walked back into Daniel's hospital room carrying a pizza box, the smell of melted cheese filling the air. Daniel's eyes fluttered open, still weak but more alert than before. Beside him, Marcus sat stiffly in the visitor's chair, hands folded over the paper airplane. "Dad?" Daniel's voice was hoarse, but the word was clear. Nathaniel leaned close, brushing his son's hair back. "I'm here, son. Not going anywhere." Daniel's eyes shifted to Marcus. You stayed?" Marcus gave a nervous shrug. "Told you I would." Daniel's lips curved into a faint smile. "Then you're my brother in the alley." Nathaniel felt his throat tighten. He opened the pizza box, placing it on the rolling tray. "How about we make this official over pizza?" The 2 boys shared a laugh. Soft, cracked by fatigue, but real. Daniel sat up slowly with Nathaniel's help, and Marcus slid closer, the 3 of them forming a small circle around the box. Nathaniel watched as Daniel tore a slice in half and handed it to Marcus. "No rules here," Daniel said weakly. "You saved me. You get first bite." Marcus hesitated, then took it, grinning through a mouthful of
He's
cheese.
not moving. I
Nathaniel
found this.
chuckled quietly,
coming. Stay
though
right
behind
there.
his smile was something heavier, a realization that in this simple moment, with grease-stained napkins and 2 boys leaning shoulder to shoulder, he felt closer to being a father than he ever had. He looked at them both, then reached for the paper airplane still clutched in Marcus's hand. He smoothed one of the bent wings. "This little thing saved 2 lives last night," he said. "My son's, and mine." Marcus looked down, whispering, "It's just paper." Nathaniel shook his head. "No. It's a promise, and promises matter." He pressed it back into Marcus's palm. The room fell quiet except for the hum of machines and the distant chatter of nurses. Daniel leaned back on his pillow, eyes half closed but smiling. Marcus sat straighter, as if the weight of the paper airplane had given him something solid to hold on to. For Nathaniel, watching the 2 boys side by side, it felt like the beginning of a family he never expected, and one he refused to lose again. The next morning, sunlight filtered through blinds, laying striped shadows across the hospital bed. Daniel stirred awake, groggy, but stronger. Marcus sat in the chair by the window, head tilted back, still clutching the paper airplane like it was treasure. Nathaniel rose from his place beside the bed. He stretched, his navy suit jacket draped over the chair, his tie loosened. For once, he didn't look like the man who ruled Chicago's logistics empire, just a father who hadn't left his son's side. "Morning," Daniel murmured, his voice rough. Nathaniel leaned close. "How do you feel?" "Like I got run over." Daniel tried to joke, but his wince betrayed him. Then his eyes shifted to Marcus. "He really stayed all night?" "Yes," Nathaniel said softly. "All night. He wouldn't leave you." Marcus stirred, blinking awake. "Told you. I keep my word." Daniel smiled weakly. "Then you're more than a friend. You're my brother in the alley." The words hung heavy in the quiet room. Marcus looked down quickly, embarrassed. "I don't got brothers," he whispered. "You do now," Daniel said. His small hand reached across the blanket. Marcus hesitated, then clasped it, his grip tight, his eyes shining despite himself. Nathaniel swallowed hard, watching them. Two boys, one his by blood, one by choice, holding on to each other like lifelines. A knock came at the door. A nurse entered, setting down breakfast trays. "Your son's stable, Mr. Carter. If things continue well, he'll be discharged tomorrow." Nathaniel thanked her, but his gaze stayed fixed on the boys. When the nurse left, Daniel broke the silence. "Dad?" "Yes, son." "Can Marcus come home with us, just for a while?" Nathaniel's heart thudded. He looked at Marcus, whose face had gone pale. "I don't need pity," the boy whispered quickly. "I can take care of myself." Nathaniel knelt beside him, steady and sincere. "It's not pity, Marcus. It's family, if you'll let us." Marcus's lip trembled. He shook his head as if fighting something inside, then finally whispered, "Why me?" Nathaniel placed the paper airplane back into his hands. "Because you kept this alive. You saved my son, and last night you saved me too." Daniel squeezed Marcus's hand tighter. "Please," he said softly, "come home." Marcus stared at both of them, his walls cracking under the weight of something he'd never felt before, being wanted. By the time Daniel was discharged, the story had already spread. Cameras flashed outside the hospital as Nathaniel guided his son into the waiting car, Marcus close behind. Microphones pressed forward, voices overlapping. "Mr. Carter, is it true a street boy saved your son? Are you adopting him? Is this a publicity stunt for Carter Global?" Nathaniel shielded both boys with his arm, jaw set, eyes straight ahead. Inside the car, Daniel leaned against his shoulder, tired but safe. Marcus sat stiffly across from them, eyes wide at the frenzy outside. The next morning, headlines blared. "Billionaire's son saved by street boy." Commentators debated whether Nathaniel was exploiting the story for image repair. Investors called in, nervous about the company's stock. Some accused him of parading Marcus for sympathy. In the penthouse office high above Michigan Avenue, Nathaniel stood at the window while his chief of staff rattled off concerns. "Public perception's volatile. We need a statement, preferably distancing you from the boy." Nathaniel turned slowly, his blue eyes colder than steel. "Distancing?" He looked toward the couch where Daniel and Marcus sat bent over a pizza box, folding new paper airplanes. Laughter floated through the office, innocent and unguarded. "He saved my son's life," Nathaniel said firmly. "He is not a liability. He is family." The staffer stammered, "Sir, investors—" "Investors can wait," Nathaniel cut in, his voice sharp. "I've spent years building towers of steel. It's time I build something that matters more." Later that night, Nathaniel sat at the kitchen table in his townhouse watching Daniel teach Marcus how to balance a paper airplane perfectly on its nose. Their laughter filled the space that had too often been silent. His phone buzzed with another message from corporate, warnings about market fallout. Nathaniel set it face down, ignoring it. He couldn't ignore the truth in front of him. The world could think what it wanted. These two boys were his world now. The following week, Nathaniel Carter stepped onto a small stage at a Southside community center. Cameras crowded the back. But his focus stayed on the children seated up front, faces hungry for hope, some in hand-me-down jackets, some barefoot despite the chill. Daniel sat in the front row beside Marcus, the paper airplane resting on his knee. Nathaniel adjusted the microphone. He wasn't dressed in his usual Navy suit, but in an open-collared shirt, sleeves rolled. He looked less like a billionaire, more like a father trying to set things right. "My son is alive today," he began, his voice steady but thick with emotion, "because a boy you might have overlooked refused to walk away. He stayed. He called. He showed loyalty and courage most of us forget when the world looks the other way." The room was silent, listening. No child in this city should have to face violence alone. No child should feel invisible. He held up the paper airplane. Its creases were worn, the ink smudged, but it still held its shape. This small thing carried my number, but it also carried a bigger truth. Sometimes the smallest hands remind us of the greatest responsibility. He announced the Safe Streets Initiative, a multi-million-dollar program funding youth shelters, after-school programs, and mentorship in neighborhoods often left behind. He cited statistics of rising violence among unsupervised children, vowing to redirect part of his empire's profits into protecting the very streets where Marcus once stood alone. Reporters shouted questions. "Is this to repair your image, Mr. Carter?" Nathaniel looked past the cameras to the boys in the front row. "No, this isn't about my image. This is about their future." Later, as the crowd dispersed, Daniel tugged at his sleeve. "Dad, you really mean it, don't you? Not just for today." Nathaniel knelt, resting a hand on his son's shoulder. "I mean it for every day after this one." He turned to Marcus, who stood uncertainly at the edge of the stage. "No child should be left invisible. Not you, not anyone." Marcus's eyes glistened. For the first time, he whispered, "Thank you, Dad." The word caught Nathaniel off guard, tearing through the last of his guarded walls. He didn't correct it. He only pulled both boys close, feeling the weight of promise settle firmly in his heart. 2 weeks later, the townhouse kitchen smelled of cinnamon and warm cocoa. The world outside buzzed with headlines and debates about Carter Global's new initiative, but inside, the evening belonged to just 3 people. Daniel sat at the table in his pajamas, his hair still damp from a shower. Marcus sat beside him, hunched over with intense focus, folding sheet after sheet of colorful origami paper. Nathaniel leaned against the counter, sleeves rolled, watching them with a softness few had ever seen on his face. "Not too tight on the crease," Daniel coached, grinning. "You'll ruin the wings." Marcus rolled his eyes but smiled. "I know. This one's for you anyway." Nathaniel walked over, setting down a polished wooden box. Its lid gleamed under the light, engraved with the words, "For promises worth keeping." He opened it, revealing stacks of folded origami airplanes, red, blue, white, each carefully inscribed in Nathaniel's neat handwriting. Marcus's mouth fell open. "You made these?" Nathaniel nodded. "Each one carries a promise, not just to Daniel. To you, too." He handed Marcus the first airplane. Written across its wing, "A safe home." Marcus traced the words with his finger, his throat tightening. Nathaniel handed him another, "A real family." Then another, "A future worth flying toward." Tears blurred Marcus's eyes as he clutched the paper fleet. "Nobody ever promised me anything." Nathaniel knelt, his voice low but steady. "Then let me be the first. You saved my son. You saved me too. I won't forget that." Daniel leaned against his father's arm, whispering, "See? I told you we were brothers." Nathaniel pulled both boys into his embrace. For a long moment, the room was quiet except for the steady rhythm of their breathing. the soft rustle of paper wings between them. In that small kitchen, promises weren't written in contracts or stock reports. They were folded into airplanes, ready to fly wherever hope needed to go. Autumn melted into winter, and for the first time in years, Nathaniel Carter learned to balance his life. Mornings were spent reviewing contracts, afternoons walking Daniel home from school, evenings sitting with Marcus at the kitchen table over homework. Boardrooms and baseball fields shared equal space in his calendar. On a Saturday, the three of them stood in Lincoln Park, the lake wind sharp but bright with sun. Daniel held a paper airplane high, Marcus racing at his side, both boys laughing as they launched their colorful fleet into the sky. Nathaniel watched them, hands tucked in his coat pockets, his deep blue eyes following the fragile wings as they caught the wind. For once, he wasn't thinking about profits or stock prices. He was thinking about how two boys had rebuilt him from the inside out. Daniel ran back breathless. "Dad, did you see that one?" "I did," Nathaniel said, lifting him briefly into his arms. "Best one yet." Marcus stood a little apart, holding a red airplane close. Nathaniel walked over, crouching to meet his eyes. "Still keeping them safe?" Marcus nodded. "Everyone." He hesitated, then whispered, "I never thought I'd get a dad." Nathaniel's throat tightened. He rested a strong hand on the boy's shoulder. "You didn't just get a dad, Marcus. You got a family, and so did I." The wind lifted the paper airplanes higher, their colors scattering against the blue. Daniel called out, "Come on, let's fly them all." Nathaniel laughed, running forward with both boys at his side. The three of them launched the last of the promises into the air, watching them soar. For Nathaniel Carter, empire no longer meant skyscrapers or profits. It meant two boys, laughter in the wind, and the quiet, certain truth that he had finally learned how to be a father.